Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you, as always. Not too much to do. We're going to have a little bit more of a relaxed, kind of in-depth show because there is an article that I do want to break down. But first, on the show today, we will be going over the race to the bottom with this Francis Scott Key Bridge situation. We talked about the Boeing situation, but really taking a look at how that really crazy situation with one of the biggest cargo ships in the world just slamming into one of the major bridges in the DMV area and the consequences that had on just global shipping in generally. And we're going to do a breakdown by an interesting piece by Natasha Leonard in The Intercept about how pro-Israel advocates are weaponizing safety on college campuses that we talked about, previewed a little bit on yesterday's show. And we got a lot of good stuff. Yeah, so we are, just going to get started with the show today. So that, got to start with this. And we do kind of, miss some of these more just standard news reporting stories because there's only so much that we can offer as a podcast, just me doing the podcast, and not really, having access to, newsroom and experts and things like that. But there's an interesting piece in the American Prospects I do want to go through today about the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And if you don't know what happened, pretty much, how could you not? It's kind of been everywhere, but we had the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore City was struck by the container ship, the MV Dolly, which is one of the biggest, it slammed right into one of the biggest supports of the bridge, causing it to completely collapse. So a lot of kind of crazy stuff going on in this situation, especially with regards to some of the immigrant workers and the construction workers that were not really given the highest priority rescue, to say the least. And I'm sure there will be, more stories about that to come in the near future. But like much of global shipping, the MV Dolly, which took down the Key Bridge, is a flag of convenience ship with a fractured responsibility for its conditions. It was chartered by the Danish shipping giant Maersk, operated by Synergy Marine Group, and is registered in Singapore. The ship's crew is made up of 22 foreign workers from India. The boat is owned by yet another company, Grace Ocean Private Limited. After the attacks of 9/11, the worries that terrorist weapons of mass destruction could be hidden in shipping containers, the U.S. and other nations went out of their way to create a global regime of inspection, identification, and clearing for the contents of containers. And it's kind of funny that that's what made them do it, of all the things. But nothing was comparably done to ensure the safety of the ships, which you think would be, pretty important. A ship like Dali is not only as good as the inspection regime in the nation where it's registered, which is to say not very good. That is the whole appeal of flags of convenience, to operate ships on the cheap. If the U.S. chose, we could require that all ships that enter American waters to be certified as meeting safety standards. The U.S. could organize other nations to create an international safety and inspection regime in the same way that they did with the kind of inspection for, the anti-terrorism inspection regime. But that would be a boon, or that would be a hurt to profits. That would, more safety costs, more regulation. Business leaders not going to like that. So it's just not going to happen. And then we're going to see, massive and important pieces of infrastructure just get, just brought down like someone blew on them. But of course, really, it was a massive ship that hit them because, most likely, and we're going to get more into this, but it is part of the deregulation. But we do know that the ship here, it's important to say, had prior mishaps. In 2016, it collided with the berth at the container terminal at Antwerp, causing significant damage to the ship and closing the terminal for repairs. Neither Maersk nor the ship's owners at the time, a Greek company called Ocean Bulk Maritime, were held accountable. And it's the same with the labor standards. Standards for American seafarers are well regulated, and union contracts add to that quality. There's no such standards for workers on flag convenience crews, which is probably what some of the biggest companies use to, get your Amazon packages from point A to point B. Me, I'm virtuous. I never order Amazon. No, I'm just kidding. I don't really do it a lot, but it's, I do like to, buy things in the store. They fit, even if it's not, the greatest selection ever. But Anyway, the point is, it's a very messed up world in the just shipping and seafaring world in general. And here it's just another instance of where you can see this kind of capitalism and this kind of race to the bottom, in the same way that we saw with the Boeing situation, of just cutting costs as much as possible, ensuring profits as much as possible, and really just letting any sort of, really critical just standards that, just do keep any industry that's really critically important, keep that afloat. So it's going to be, it's really important to highlight that. And that's what we see with this, and the Boeing situation and countless other situations as well. Maryland law does require that for all pilots of ships going through Baltimore Harbor be certified and licensed. Local captains pilot ships through the harbor until they get out to sea. But we have no idea what the crew did or did not do to keep the Dolly ship shape while it was at sea. None of the mention of globalization is the intensified immigration, both documented and undocumented. The workers who were on the Key Bridge, 6 of whom died, were immigrants. There's no evidence that they did their jobs poorly. Mainly, they were exploited by the contractor. The federal Davis-Bacon Act requires prevailing wages to be paid on public construction contracts. In practice, that has been interpreted to mean that union wages and union contractors. Maryland has its own state Davis-Bacon Act, and so does Baltimore County, but Bronner Builders, which got the contract, is a non-union contractor. And I think the big question is, the big point is, it shouldn't have received the contract at all. Union sources tell Robert Kuttner here in The Prospect, and I apologize if I don't remember if I said that previously. This is the American Prospect. Union sources tell me that this misclassification is rampant in this kind of work, and that it's likely these workers are being paid as independent contractors, which is doubly illegal. The Labor Department should be taking a look at better enforcement of the Davis-Bacon Act and misclassification, and the Department of Transportation should bar contracts, to those who violate the law. Enforcement lapses of laws in the books ended in one more tragic race to the bottom, literally. And that is a very important point there. Just basic, because a lot of these laws, they are on the books, but just through regulatory capture have just become, nobody seems to even end up enforcing them anymore, which can be a very big problem. All right, now we're going to go to our next story. It's a very interesting one here from Natasha Leonard in The Intercept. 2 weeks ago, the Columbia chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine publicized an email leaked by an anonymous student at the university's social work school. In the email, a professor who is also not named in the screenshot raised the issue of a Palestinian flag emoji that the student had placed next to her name in Zoom meetings. On an unrelated matter, the professor wrote, "It's recently been brought to my attention that geopolitical emojis, i.e. the Palestinian flag," this is getting the email from the professor here, used at the end of name info has caused trauma reactions, making it difficult for some to remain present and not dissociate during class sessions. And this definitely feeds into the whole safety situation. It's just like geopolitical emojis, and just this continue the language of just like the idea of the Palestinian flag causing people to dissociate. And the professor asked for the students' continued partnership in ensuring our classroom remains a safe space for all. In an excruciatingly polite response, the student asked for permission to discuss the issue collectively with the class. It said stuff of far-right parody, and a certain example of woke culture, an Ivy League professor invoking the language of trauma response in an email that refers to class members as folks with an X, suggesting the removal of an emoji. Yet the professor's email speaks to a broader problem of student safety being flattened into a question of whether students feel safe. And these aren't reactionary tropes of left-wing snowflakes. Safety is being invoked by pro-Israel students, many conservative and center-right, who believe that protests targeting the nation-state constitute inherent attacks on them as Jews. The same dynamic played out in the fall at the same university. Last November, Columbia banned its chapters for Students for Justice in Palestine and the Jewish Voice for Peace. The Intercept reported because an unauthorized event put on by the groups included threatening rhetoric and intimidation. When challenged to name the threat, Senior Executive Vice President Gerald Roseberg said only, according to a lawsuit filed on behalf of the student groups, that the accusations that Israel was a, quote, racist state committing genocide and is, quote, an apartheid state could upset some people and seem like an incitement of violence. And then, this does kind of go to the fit into the regime, though, and it's very clear, and everyone's thinking of this in the back of their head, or maybe in the front, the tip of their tongue, that this is a very similar to the same, kind of situation, the same language that was being used in the wake of 2020 and Black Lives Matter on, college campuses, and which, kind of does go to some of the things I, was saying kind of at the time about that, which is the fact that it is very, very hard to be consistent, not just have this message co-opted politically. And some people would say, I'm not talking about politically, but then everything kind of is political. It all circles back. It all comes back to bite you in the ass. Even if you do have a good point, even these people are being incredibly shitty, then the next time you're going to want to come in and protest for Palestine, they're going to use the same standards, they're going to use the same language against you, and you're not going to be able to really validate or disprove, I guess I could just say invalidate, anything that they're saying, because they're just like, they're just sticking to these same standards. And you can make I think a pretty fair argument that's like, these people are talking about, a nation state that a lot of them don't even have any really, legal association towards. And so that's not the same thing as my immutable characteristics, but again, like, the question becomes, who's going to enforce that? Who's going to, make that determination to be like, this is where, this is an immutable identity-based characteristic, who gets to be, put in that protected class conversation, and who decides that? I feel like it's very, very hard for people, even if they have, good points, to come and confidently say that they will always be in the position to, control the situation. And when you're not in the position to control the situation, you can have some pretty severe consequences. Like your group being banned, you're being doxxed, all that stuff, because of the way the woke standards of the day have kind of flipped. And again, it's not really the woke standards of the day, because, a lot of the, people who were woke before are now pro-Palestine supporters, but that the people who are in power at the moment, as we see in Colombia, as we see in all these other institutions and universities that have, banned or, censored pro-Palestinian speech in some way, shape, or form, is that those people, just happen to be, for their political interests, happen to be woke in the way that takes away the Palestinian speech. New York City's Upper West Side isn't the only setting for such thing complaints. A staggeringly imbalanced feature in the Atlantic this week, written by our favorite person we talked about earlier, who set off this whole, theme of focusing about colleges here on this show, unfortunately. It was written by Stanford sophomore Theo Baker, offered up a supposedly neutral narrative that treats the conflict on his college campus as a battle between imperiled Jewish students and unreasoned pro-Palestine zealots, who are just, at once, like ridiculously ideological, and also strivers who are just supporting Palestine because they think it's the right answer on, the multiple choice tests that they see as their lives. It's just like, ridiculous framing of it, either way, no matter what. The right-wing culture warriors and conservative Zionist groups are using similar claims about campus incidents nationwide. Safety is the latest weapon in the culture war, being deployed now to deal a blow to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives known as DEI and silence criticism of Israel. The result has brought us to an intolerable status quo, with students and faculty risking grave consequences for protesting a war in which Israel has slaughtered 31,000 people. Israel's U.S.-backed assault has raised to rubble every single university in Gaza, but the concern as relates to intellectual life in this country focuses instead on the inoculation of Israel's young supporters from bad feeling. And that's the same, same kind of logic. There's like, we shouldn't have to, pretend you're, This is the same logic that they'll throw back at the right. It's like, facts don't care about your feelings. You shouldn't be governed by the feelings of the moment and the feelings of a certain group of people who say that they don't like this speech. They say they want to shut it down in some way. And it's a pretty, kind of does show the kind of trump card nature of that if you actually listen to it. Among certain people, because it would just be like, if you feel unsafe, there's nothing I can do, and I just have to take your concerns seriously. When some people who are acting in bad faith should not have their concerns taken seriously in any way. People are taking their feelings of being uncomfortable with information as the same as being physically unsafe, said Layla, a Palestinian American graduate student at the Columbia School of Social Work, who asked to withhold her last name for fear of harassment. As a Palestinian student, I've lost family in Gaza. Frankly, I get uncomfortable when Zionist students are chanting no ceasefire on campus. That makes me uncomfortable. That makes me feel unsafe. But I know it's not a physical threat to my safety. That's free speech. The need to distinguish between feeling safe and being safe is both urgent and undeniably fraught. Anti-Semitism is rising. There have been instances, including on campuses, of Jewish students being harassed and targeted solely for wearing a kippah or being otherwise identified as Jewish. Islamophobic, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian violence is surging, and an American-supported genocide is being carried out halfway across the world in the purported name of Jewish safety. Yet this is no time for cowardice. Writing as a professor and a Jew, with a profound commitment to my students' safety and well-being, I see an imperative for them to learn and distinguish between genuine threat and paranoia, that their judgment of the world be grounded and attentive to the workings of power, propaganda, and ideology. Instead, a perfect political storm, driven in large part by sustained campaigning from pro-Israel groups, has produced structures of feeling, a map of collective emotions at the historical junctures that are resistant to challenge. And, that's the whole problem with this, feeling framework of just because, again, you're feeling unsafe, we saw this being used against, Bernie Sanders as well. Just because you're feeling, when he was running for president, just because you're feeling unsafe doesn't mean, in a bad faith way, just because when Bernie gets on a, passionate rant that makes you think of your dad, that doesn't mean that you have to, everyone should stop and say, Bernie, you need to stop yelling so much. That's a very stupid or small example, but it is kind of a representative of that same dynamic. She says, Natasha Leonard says, in one way, universities are validating the feelings as proof of real danger may be out of their hands through Title IX complaints, or I believe that's Title VI complaints. I had a little Roman numeral brain fart there. I apologize. In some cases, official investigations. Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. By statute, universities are duty-bound to take these complaints seriously, but that does not mean they're always serious. In the post-October 7th campus battle, the complaints in question consistently center on claims of campus anti-Semitism, referring to Title VI's protection from discrimination based on national origin. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has opened 80 open Title VI investigations that have risen since October 7th that fall under the category of shared ancestry discrimination, which also covers incidents of Islamophobia and other religious discrimination. And just one man, Zachary Marshall, the editor of Right-Wing Campus Reform, is responsible for 10 of them, according to a database of the complaints and investigations put together from public data by the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. And Marshall, obviously, outspoken critic of DEI. And this is kind of where you get to the hypocrisy of it from the other side. And there's all these people who have been railing against the crazy culture on universities and saying they're not allowing free speech, they're silencing conservative ideas. They're not now trying to flip this same situation on people who are critical of Palestine, because they know the people who are in charge, which again, the university administrators and all the other places that would feel this way, but primarily universities, but really any other major institution that would fire somebody for being pro-Palestinian, and there's a lot of them, look at Hollywood and various places like that. So it's really, really clear that it is a flipped effort, and it really relies on the people who are in power Consider, by the way of example, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, against which Marshall filed a Title VI complaint. Campus Reform wrote about the school too. In November, a post cited as evidence of anti-Jewish animus the fact that a faculty open letter in support of Gaza ceasefire was commended by the Council on Islamic Relations. So, that's one of the major American Islamic Relations, which is one of the biggest, Muslim civil rights groups in the country. This Muslim civil rights group that Campus Reform alleges connected to Hamas, a common attack against CARE, the group has denied as a smear. Marshall may well think the discrimination he's alleging is very real, but it hangs on a thin reed. To have that desired impact, though, the Title VI complaints don't necessarily need to be sustained. The Department of Education might rule that Marshall's complaints fail to show civil rights violations, but the investigations themselves can have a chilling effect, forcing universities to act out of fear of losing federal funding. The investigations can and have drummed up publicity, putting other universities' funding in the crosshairs. The effects of similar pressure campaigns have already been felt. Elite universities have appeased wealthy pro-Israel donors who have, since October 7th, threatened to withhold their money if anti-Israel speech is tolerated on campus. It's the continued just weaponization of anti-Semitism. Using anti-Semitism for political ends is not a new tack. Efforts like Marshall's play into a pattern of reporting on anti-Semitism that obfuscates rather than clarifies material anti-Semitic threats. Frightening statistics leading to sensationalized headlines about soaring campus anti-Semitism are compiled by conservative, agenda-driven watchdogs that conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism as policy. They assert without compunction that calls for Palestinian liberation are a threat to Jews. The statistics then take on the imprimatur of official narrative, stoke further fear, and resist dispute. Any such challenge is open to charges of anti-Semitism denialism. Meanwhile, 3 Palestinian students wearing keffiyehs were shot last November in Vermont, leaving one paralyzed from the waist down. An Arab Muslim student in Stanford was hospitalized in a hit-and-run in November. The authorities are investigating as a hate crime, which I think was very interesting here, and she points us out that was not mentioned in Theo Baker's story, because you have a lot of people, again, who are trying to feel unsafe, who are trying to, but then you get the people, the spraying of, meanwhile, this whole, shy David like these people who are making, literally a federal case out of pro-Palestinian protests being very aggressive in Colombia, but no one does anything. The same people don't do anything when those same universities, people are sprayed with toxic skunk spray. The disparity of the stakes, felt safety, and its material counterpart becomes even starker when one's gaze is turned to where it really matters, Palestine itself. Students speaking out for Palestine are not doing so to shore up campus safety for Palestinian students, which the Palestinian students, of course, deserve, but because they are desperate to see an end to the Israeli assault on Gaza. I question why our focus is on the elite college campuses and their use of language over the horrific injustices being committed against the Palestinian people. Mariam Iqbal, a freshman at Barnard College, and among the students hospitalized after the Columbia chemical attack. And she's still keeping the focus where it matters. It's absolutely incredible that this stuff is like this narrative of just like the crazy college. Like the campus is crazy for people who are actually standing up when there is a real genocide going on and not just sitting by and letting it happen. Like, these people are literally allowed to get attacked by the universities. The universities transparently could not care less about their own students getting attacked, in relation to these pro-Palestinian protests, and, suspending them, expelling them, all that stuff. It's just been absolutely incredible to see. But, with this whole dynamic, it is very, very difficult to play this game and build this standard where you can appeal to university administrators to essentially attack people that you don't like, because again, they're always going to come and turn around and attack you because they're just they're the people that they had the cudgel, and whoever has the cudgel in the first place is able to deal with it. And when it actually matters, when you're actually standing up for something that matters and you're actually facing real risk to do it, it can be a real problem when that just standard exists in the first place. Iqbal told me that she has hoped that following the chemical attack, the university's administration attitude towards what constitutes threat and safety, where risks lie, would change. And she said nothing had shifted. Instead, attacks on expression continue. Last month, Barnard banned students from displaying any decorations on dorm room doors to avoid the unintended effect of isolating those who have different views and beliefs. There are, without question, students who feel hurt and unwelcome when faced with protests and speech condemning Israel as a genocidal apartheid state. Many Jewish people struggle to square such realities with the idealized notion of Israel we were raised with, that it is noble and necessary state for Jewish safety. I know, too, that there are Jewish students who fear anti-Semitic groups and individuals who are simply using opposition to Israel as a guise for anti-Jewish hate, and there's certainly historic precedent. And there are, as I noted, examples of genuine heightened anti-Semitism on campus. When Jewish people are targeted for being Jewish, we need to act with severity. Fear, however, does not make a protest against Israel, even a protest against its maintenance as a Jewish ethno-state, a protest against Jews. So I think that's a very, very important point, and we'll probably end it right there. And it is just putting those two those two concepts into appropriate comparison can be very, very effective and important, to say the least. All right. That's all we got for you guys today. We'll be back in a bit because I will be going on a bit of a vacation. See you soon.